So my wife wanted to run for a position with the Boca City Council. There is just this big room that you walk in, and they have like a bunch of cops that are keeping it secure. These are very delicate people. And
the six people?
The six people.
They're protected?
And then there's a bunch of older people, mostly 70s, some 80s, around that area, kind of dropping down. And they decide, okay, well, like, if you are going to, probably like 20, 30 people, which they said was a lot. Mm-hmm. And they said, okay, so the people who are trying to be on this board, this home owners, like, housing board.
That's what she was running for?
Like a housing board kind of thing, where they discuss homelessness and, low-income homes for people to live in and different things like that. So with her history in working in the rapid rehousing in the Salvation Army and then to doing the women's shelter stuff, she dealt with a lot of women with those struggles and thought she would do well with that. So I guess she didn't read the email much that said to come for the interview. So it's during this thing.
Oh, really?
So they call it, and then this guy before her is a literal preacher. Like a literal older black man preacher.
So you had to do an interview in front of everybody?
It's just talking for 5 minutes.
Oh
it's God. Talking for 5 minutes about why you're that guy or that woman. So there's a literal preacher there.
Amen.
And then Kelsey walks up, and she's so little. And I was so nervous. You're like...
You're nervous for her?
Oh, apparently I knew that she didn't write anything or didn't have anything prepared. So, you're going in front of a room of, 30 people, including the mayor of your city, and Boca's a pretty decent-sized city, and you have nothing. I would say that, at my best day, I could maybe swing something like that. It's tough, though. That's a tough order of business to tell Israel. So she went up there and, she actually did a really good job at...
Just pulling shit out.
About, saying about her history. At one point, I whispered to her while the preacher was talking. And I was like, hey, maybe talk about your work. And she's like, I got it. I got it. And she went, and I felt like the mayor, she gave her a reason, but the mayor didn't smile and like anybody. And he smiled and liked Kelsey. Now, she says it's just because she's a girl.
Probably not.
When the preacher was like, I hope I made myself understood. And the mayor says, I think.
No.
Yeah.
That means no.
That definitely means no. It's very disrespectful.
It's probably just because she's so young, to be honest.
Yeah.
She just needs another 10 years.
That's what I was saying. And, you got to make yourself a little bit more known. This is the first time they're ever hearing her name.
Exactly.
And she's trying
But
to
everybody has to start somewhere.
Yeah, you got to put your toe in the water. You got to go out there and you show up, and you just get your name out there.
I could never. I'm very, respectful that people have that guts to do that shit.
Yeah.
Because, I can... I get nervous just thinking about talking in front of people.
Oh, yeah, in this kind of, political environment, too. And, you're
having everybody look at me is, my biggest fear.
They were into it. Jeez. I was hoping. But, yeah, I think she'll be back. I was always very nervous by the end of... One of the great things about college and stuff is that there's so many public speaking things that are forced on you.
That's true.
That it gives you a good advantage in that, but when you're doing it all the time, you start to get kind of used to it. By the end of my master's, I thought I was the best speaker. I would challenge myself to not even make a PowerPoint, and just go off the cuff and just kill it. And, I forgot my brother's wedding. So I'm thinking to myself, now this is like 4 to 5 years later of no public speaking. And I was thinking, all right, like I always kill it.
Yeah,
like I'm gonna go up there and I'm just gonna be charming and everybody's gonna lose their mind about it. And like the first like joke, the first thing I thought would get like a laugh got nothing. Just dead silence.
What'd you say?
It wasn't like, I'm not an inappropriate guy at like a wedding. Like I'm not like that like best man who's like, you have to get so much tail.
Yeah.
You know, like it was nothing like that. It wasn't like inappropriate. It was like just very sweet almost.
Take this candy away.
It is tough to have in front of you. So it bombed, and then at that point I became the worst public speaker in the world in the moment after my first bombed joke. And I just couldn't.
You got nervous after
that? I got super nervous. I'm like, it's gone. Like my public speaking is gone. So yeah, I think I've had like a couple of chances since. And like, you know, it takes practice like anything.
Some people, it takes them less practice.
You know now that is on the mic. In psychology master's world, we did a lot of role plays, which was a lot of fun.
Did you ever do like theater stuff?
No, this was the closest.
I did theater stuff, and I remember like having to do like improvisation group circle things, and oh my god, like I think if I would have kept from like an early age, I would have been fine. But I have like this social anxiety now that I can't even talk to my grandparents sometimes without getting nervous. Like, what's wrong with me?
I'm the same.
What's wrong with me? I get nervous talking to my dad. Why?
You know what? With like my grandmother, I think it's like it just makes me so terribly sad. You know, like she's just at a very low place.
She's at the end.
She's at the end. We live in different states. You know,
different parts of your
lives. There's
lives.
like the guilt of that, and then there's just that she's not happy. You know, it's like you say, oh hey,
not even with all of her boyfriends.
No, this is the other one. That one's happy as a kitty cat. That one's probably, she's 90. She's
gonna die happy.
Yeah, she's probably going out dancing tonight. It's like they're the opposite spectrum, the same exact age.
It shows like you can't give up in life.
Yeah, one of them just sits there and she just thinks about people that have wronged her, and the other one just bangs.
One's doing it right and one's not.
Yeah, you really see what it's all about at the end.
My grandparents are similar. Like my grandpa like runs around and is happy, and my grandma just sits at home all the time. Yeah. I mean, she does run around sometimes, but she's not happy.
Yeah. You never. Who did the stages of life?
I don't know.
Is Erickson? You know what I'm talking about?
There was a lot of people that did.
There were so many. This is what I hate.
There's too many.
You know, we always it was Erickson, and he. You always get people who are like who've heard some psych thing, like some, and it's just one of these studies or that, and they're like, oh, you know about like Maslow's second, like they've somehow have every single Maslow stage down.
You know what I'm kind of like a little bit worried about is like all the stuff we learned, is it real still?
I don't think it is.
I think a lot of the stuff that I've learned is not right anymore. Right?
Yeah, you know you got a few years on me before. Younger than me.
Yeah, but I'm from Ohio and you're from New York. So I probably am worse than you. In honesty.
The one advantage that you had was that I believe that when you were getting your master's, you had the DSM-5.
Yeah, that came out, I think, actually in the end of my bachelor's.
Okay. Yeah, so, like, my psych training and, like, studying was with the DSM-4R, which was like really, really different. I think a good example of that is there was almost nothing about gender. It's hard to imagine when it's so popular for numerous reasons in our media right now. But yeah, there was really almost no discussion about that. I had seen it in writing the other day and I was laughing. I hadn't seen just LGB. But do you remember how popular?
No, I don't remember LGB actually.
Yeah, that was the popular line. You would just hear that they were LGB, and like people would rhyme it, and like it was all with the E at it, and it was all about the LGB. It sounds weird to even say. Now with no many numbers.
LBG sounds like a president.
Yeah, LGB. That was what it was. Now they've edited it. So we didn't have much training in kind of the trans sexual kind of movement, but popularity.
Yeah.
And that was kind of an interesting thing. So it seems like it's most like they're constantly talking about gender and
it's like
sexuality.
That's all anybody wants to talk about.
Yeah.
It's to the point where it's like when I was younger and I first started like dating girls, it was all exciting and it was like just when things started to become fun for like gay people. And now it's like too much. Now I'm like, I hate it. I hate all of this.
Yeah, that kind of whole culture built around it.
Yeah.
Well, and there's so many at the parades and stuff. There's so much kink stuff surrounding
It's
children.
always been kinky, but it was never like for kids.
Yeah, that's the difference.
And now it's like, oh, you have to accept this. And you know what? I am offended that drag queens are the people that they want to represent diversity and minorities. Like, that's disrespectful. Like, those are the people that are going to represent, like, our community. Like, there's no, like, trans people that are, like, you know, in business or in politics or doing something cool that could be a role model. It has to be a drag queen who's a gay guy.
Did you see the Canadian teacher with the size Z prosthetic boobs that she had? Now that's weird.
And I honestly, I don't think that anyone should be forced to like have their boobs taken out.
No, I don't.
But you can't.
She just put them in there. I think she put them there in the morning. Like
they're not even real.
I believe they're not real.
Okay, well if they're not real, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
But if they are real, then I would say like you can't make somebody take away do a surgery. However, you can't pretend that that's not weird and like kids are not gonna laugh.
And like the nips they're really they're super hard.
Like come on, like kids are gonna always make fun of teachers for something. Like how many teachers do you remember that people would like talk about their boobs or whatever?
They passed the rule that the kids can't photograph it anymore. So that was the rule they made because they couldn't deal with these posts going on the internet. And
I'm sorry, she needs to just accept it. You know, like that's part of getting boobs that big. If you're putting in huge tits and you're a teacher and you're a trans teacher, like you're already bringing attention to yourself. And it's like
negative attention.
If you want attention, that's fine, but you're going to really like pretend that you don't. Like that's an attention.
Yeah, that's exactly my feeling on it. That you have, it's clearly about this presentation and this performance, and like you just can't. That a high school or junior high is just not the place for sexual performance.
No.
And you have this issue, and it's probably such a non-issue in America. Like it's such a strong one that the conservatives use. You know, I think like Ohio passes this law that like completely bans trans children from playing in the other sex. And I think there was one person that it actually applied to. You know, so it's not...
That's so messed up.
Imagine it's like you were like, my state, as a kid, like you're insecure, you hate yourself, you even have the additional burden of kind of this gender dysphoria. Mm-hmm. And then the state that you live in passes a law negatively affecting you about you personally. Like,
yeah, I think they've done that in Florida too, where some parents had to sign a consent form because a gay kid was going to be like spending the night with all the other kids. Mind you, there were straight boys and straight girls, you know, so it wasn't like, but being with this gay kid was like a pervert in the school's mind or whatever, to the extent that they needed permission, all the parents' permission, to allow this kid to stay with the rest of the kids. It's like you're pointing out one person and you're being like really like mean.
So the parents had to sign. Their parents had to sign something saying, "I know that there's going to be this gay kid there."
Like, yeah, there's going to be this gay kid, and are you okay with it?
Where was this?
In Florida somewhere.
Jeez.
Yeah. So this is just like really mean, and I feel like both sides are just being like really crazy about it, because like we don't need maybe drag queens to be the face of the LGBTQ movement or even the trans movement. However, I don't necessarily think that every drag queen reading storybooks to a kid is like a sexual performance.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, if they're dressed normal and whatever, and it's just like a funny thing. Like, we have clowns and stuff around kids, and that's fucking weird. Like, they're usually drunk people, like people at the fairs and stuff, like all the carnies and whatever. Like, you never hear good stories about those kind of people. Or even like Santa. We have our kids sit on a lap of a man who is getting paid very little to be Santa Claus. Like, who do you think wants to be Santa Claus? Like, probably weird people.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Gender can be different than sexuality.
Yeah.
Though. Because you see even, like, trans people who maybe, like, a male to female trans who are still attracted to females. Like, it doesn't mean that they're want to be a woman so they can date men. You know, like, maybe they want to be a woman despite the fact that they still are attracted to women, and they could have just dated women as their original body.
How much do you think about your gender? Like, for me, I guess just as a pretty, like, prototypical cisgendered male. We never heard that word when I was in my master's program.
Yeah, I don't think we really talked about gender when we were young. It was, like, your sex. But I did think about my sex a lot. Like, even from, like, a really early age.
I guess when you're not completely normative.
Well, it wasn't even that. It was just, like, I couldn't do things because of my sex. Like, I was left out because of my sex. Like, my dad and brother were always doing things and boy things that I wasn't, like, invited to, or, you know, like, it wasn't something that they thought I would even want to do.
Yeah, maybe. And then you just gotta sit and do nothing.
Yeah, or even learning that, like, one day I'm gonna get married and have to change my name. Like, my name's not really my name. Like, it's my name now.
You're kind of renting it. If you're
like, you don't really have a last name. Your last name is whoever you belong to. Like, you begin belonging to your dad, and then you belong to your husband.
Yeah, I never really thought about it like that.
But as, like, a girl, I do think...
Because I took so much pride. Yeah. Because, like, I took so much... Even a ridiculous last name is my own. Like, you think about, like, family history, and you think about your name, and, like, it really means a lot.
That's why I brought it up. Like, that's what made me start thinking about it. Because I was like, I'm not going to be a Morrow forever. Because you start to learn, like, oh, my mom was a Fraser growing up.
Yeah, like, how did that work?
My grandma was a Johnson. You know, like, so all these other people, like, they grew up with their family. And that's... You have, like, this family pride, but that's not your last name.
Yeah.
Like, they take it away from you.
Yeah, it's true. I know it meant a lot. Kelsey really loves her father, you know, a lot, and took pride in having that name.
It was a cool last name, too.
Yeah, so we were... It's probably a better one than the current one. But, you know, she was upset. I think I had to agree to let her name the first two children to get her to switch her name and not just hyphenate.
But, you know, also, to be fair, like, at a certain point when you have hyphenated names, and it's like, if you have, like, Natalie has two hyphenated last names, right, for her parents. If she were to get married to me and didn't want to change her last names, what last names would the kids have? Would they have 3? And if I had
Where
a
do they
Dash
start
last
at?
name with, like, eventually somebody's name has to be chosen. Like, we can't just have, like it's like a family tree of
Because she
last
usually
names.
uses the 2, right?
Yeah, she doesn't have a middle name, so she just uses Natalie and then her 2 last
Yeah,
names.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's what I've seen. On
People always think
social
like the
media.
first one is her middle name. Just like, no, she doesn't have a middle name. I don't know why.
It sounds like, to me, it sounds like a last name. It sounds like a good last name. It really rolls off the tongue. I guess that's like the Cuban tradition, right? Usually.
Yeah, I think a lot of countries in Latin America do that.
Yeah, they. Yeah, it's funny. I remember working with children, and when to expect gay parents, because especially if you meet the kids first, and then you see they just drop off and run.
Yeah.
Like you always know. You're like, all right, is it 2 mommies or 2 daddies when you see it? Now, do you think that you would know what feeling more like a man would feel like for you? Like, how could you feel like a man, like that your gender would be?
I think it's more like people get confused of feeling like a man and a woman and wanting to do things that are stereotypical for a certain gender. And I think that is what my issue with, like being trans, I don't think is that abnormal. It's just you want to do things that are maybe a little more towards the other gender.
Yeah, that you would feel better living that.
Yeah, but I don't think that you would have to change your sex to do that. Like, I think you could just be yourself no matter what. Like, it might be confusing to somebody if they see, like, a woman and then they have, like, a penis or something. But if you had told your doctor, I mean, that's the only person that really needs to know.
Yeah, and you imagine they're just going to keep getting better and better at surgeries.
Exactly. And if you didn't tell your doctor, wouldn't that be like a health risk? Because even if you want to say like men and women are similar in like their brains, their bodies are different.
Now, do you think there's would you say somebody's wrong if they didn't tell their partner? Let's say you had a surgery.
I don't know, because like on one hand it's like the freedom of the person to be able to be themselves and not have to announce it to everybody, but then what about the freedom of the person to be with somebody that they know? Like, why should they have to be with somebody that they don't really know who they are?
Well, I guess, yeah, especially if you wanted to have children or something, it would be you would hope to know.
Yeah, and unfortunately it is something that a lot of people would care about. So even if, like, in my opinion, if someone is a trans woman and wants to be a woman, like, I accept them as a woman. I have no problem with that. Like, I don't think it's my position to decide if somebody is a woman or a man. Like, they can decide. However, like, I still think you should be upfront and as safe as a manner as
it does put somebody in a lot of danger with not telling
Yeah.
people, unfortunately.
And then if they find out, that might be more dangerous. So it might be like a safe thing to do is to like do it in like a public area or somewhere.
Like there's a lot of acceptance right now. And it seems like I've seen...
Well, with some people.
Well, maybe this isn't the best way of saying it because it's sexually motivated. But it seems like anytime I see somebody who is male to female, like they have a lot of like admirers. A lot of male admirers. Female? Yeah. Like there's a huge chunk of guys out there that like the idea of having a woman with a penis.
Yeah, because maybe they understand penises because they have one. So they like the personality of women, or like what is stereotypical for a woman.
What it seems like to the public.
Yeah.
You could have this woman and then behind closed doors.
And I think that's like a difference between maybe like sexuality and even who you're like wanting to have romantic relationships with. Like maybe a lot of people would have sex with all sorts of people, but they would only want to maybe like settle down with certain kinds of people.
Yeah, I guess there would always be a concern about, like, whether or not somebody was with you as a kink. You know, it's tough when you're like
Yeah.
different groups. Like, I'm sure even redheads and Asians
But aren't
have
we
to.
all,
Well, I guess
at
we're
the end
just
of the day?
basic white people.
because if we're attracted to each other, we're attracted because
Yeah.
they're our type. So
That's true.
isn't
It's
that
not
the
every
same as a
Asian.
kink?
Yeah, it's tough, right? I do you know the woman that looks exactly like Taylor Swift, Ashley?
Yeah.
And like she does some good videos of like people like thinking she's Taylor, and like she has to like calmly explain to him. Some guy just broke down in tears in front of her, and she like grabs him by the head, and she's like, "I am Ashley." I'm
How funny is that?
but like she plays it up, like she dresses like.
I guess at the end of the day, like, if you care about somebody for more than just sex, then it's not a kink.
Well, so yeah, I'm saying like, how much does she worry like when somebody's trying to go with her that they just want the Taylor Swift experience?
Well, I bet Taylor Swift feels the same way. Or all celebrities.
Yeah.
You're like, is it really me, or is it like this persona that you're idolized,
Yeah.
that you've like created in your mind? It's kind of like the difference between a book and a movie. It's that the real image of this story is never going to be as good as like this personalized thing that you come up with in your brain.
Yeah, if you had a star in your mind that you would like to sleep with, then like I think it probably is better in your head. You know, I felt
Yeah.
like as like a 90s person, like the thought of Pamela Anderson. Well, I guess we've seen more than the thought of her. But, you know, like if whoever
Or like
the
Megan
celebrity-
Fox.
Yeah, like Megan Fox and Transformers. Like the thought of that is
Hermione.
probably better. Hermione Granger. Yeah, for sure.
Don't get flustered over there.
Yeah.
Like, what was I saying?
You're like, yeah, I'm probably. We don't need to go off on the tangent on her fault. We could skip it over. But yeah, I think that when it actually happens, you know, you'd be like, oh, jeez, maybe it would be hard. Maybe you'd be horrible at it. You know,
You'd be so nervous that you would not know what to do. Your mouth would be dry.
Yeah, exactly. You'd be sitting there like, do it. And God knows.
Your hands are shaking and sweaty.
You're like this
Mom
is
spaghetti.
This is
One shot.
Megan Fox. I guess you just tried to take a few shots and.
But yeah,
take a few shots
going
of
back
this.
to what we started talking about, I think it was like gender and sex, I think, are something that are recently separated. Like, we didn't always care about gender, but I think that having different words for things, even though it frees some people, it also like puts other people in different boxes.
Yeah.
Like having more words for things sometimes makes it more confusing, and you don't know what you want even more. Kind of like going to cheesecake factories. Like, if you're really hungry, but there's all these things on the menu, it's like you don't really know, and that at a certain point you're just like, I'm just gonna pick one. It sounds kind of good.
Yeah, but I think you see a lot with the youth that there's a lot of picking and changing, you know,
Yeah.
over these years.
And then it kind of makes people not respect the categories because people do change. But I don't think that should be
That's
like,
negative.
yeah, I don't think that should be a big deal. Like, people change over time, and if people didn't change over time, I feel like that would be more like abnormal.
Yeah, especially when you're young and stuff. You know, it's always like you must like from a lesbian standpoint. There's always that like idea that like a woman says she's a lesbian and then goes and eventually becomes straight. Like, that's a whole cliche. That's
Yeah.
like,
especially if she's like bisexual.
yeah, exactly. You're
And
like,
I
well,
think,
of course.
even if you are bisexual, you don't even want to tell people that, because like nobody takes it well. It's not good for anyone. And
puts everybody's guard
bisexual
sexually
guys,
up.
I think, are the same thing. It's like nobody believes that bisexual. Like, either they believe that you're gonna be straight or you're gonna be gay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not gonna just stay bisexual.
Yeah, I guess depending on like what you're outwardly projecting.
Yeah.
People have made their assumption about whether or not you're on the up or downhill with.
And how many people are actually just gay or lesbian? Probably not that many, to be honest. Probably not. And how many people are just straight? Maybe not as many as what we think.
Yeah, I guess I've seen it go both ways. And somebody claiming to be a lesbian, like then it became wildly true.
Yeah.
And then for some, it was the opposite. So it's funny how like that almost it gets generalized on a whole group. Though
it's like your choice makes people determine like what your actual feelings are. But you have to pick a partner. So if you're bisexual, but you pick a man, like, that changes your sexuality. But then if you pick a woman, that also changes your sexuality. It's like whoever you end up with is your sexuality.
Yeah, and then you kind of want to please a cisgender person of the opposite sex, and there are going to be like certain cliches about womanhood or masculinity that you play when you are trying to please somebody who has normal sexual leanings. So it does kind of change the way. Do you think you would wear more dresses if you were with a guy?
Probably not.
keep it going.
I feel like I hear this all the time where people, like, I was just talking to my best friend and she was talking about cutting her hair, but that she always feels butch when she does it. Yeah. And it's just weird how we associate these things, like having long hair means that you're feminine, having short hair as a woman means that you're butch, or wearing dresses mean that you're feminine, but wearing pants mean that you're like more like a tomboy. It's like these are the reasons why people, I think, are trans, because it's like you have all these messages. Like when I was a little girl, I had dreams that I was a boy. Does that mean that I'm trans? Like, I don't think so.
Yeah, or if it's just normal.
I think that sometimes you just think about yourself as like a being, and you don't think about what you can and can't do until society tells you what you can and can't do.
See, I think that's the ideal. You know, that if everybody had that view, it would be a lot healthier. Because people wouldn't feel exploratory. I was thinking about what you're saying, like the cliche of like the women who change the sexuality. But for masculinity, it's like all designed to keep that from happening. You know, in a large way, like the guy
it's like,
isn't
why
allowed.
Would you want to give it up?
He's not allowed to experiment in that way. The same as like a female can be maybe a little bit more accepted. I think like with all of his guy friends, like I don't think a woman group would ditch their friend for saying that they're bi. You know, but like there are unfortunately guys out there that like if a guy enough crew that they're.
And I think it comes with the negative like sex ideas that we have, that like having sex with a man is like bad.
Yeah, you've taken something rather than
like,
given it.
Where you have sex with a woman, you take something from her. You have sex with a man, he takes something from you, even if you're a man. Like whoever is the receiver of the penis,
that is so sick. Right?
Is like gets something taken, even though technically they're the ones being given.
Where does it come from? Is it some old thing about not wanting?
I think it's like almost like insecurity that men have with themselves, that they're like these monsters. Like my brother even says it. He's like, "Oh, I'm controlled by my testosterone," and you hear a lot of guys saying like that they feel like they're controlled by their testosterone and their sex drives. Yeah. But we're all controlled by our hormones, technically.
It's true. There are definitely a lot of women who fall into that category, too.
One way or another.
It's nicer to think as a guy that there's no women out there that have a strong, ruthless sexual drive.
Yeah, and it's like, really scary for guys to see that. Like, my brother is like, oh, these women are hoes now. And I'm like, you're a hoe. Like, why do you care? Like, shouldn't that be better that you can get it easier? But it's not.
Yeah, it's the Madonna. What is it? Like the Madonna something. Like the sinner, saint, kind of the mother, or the Madonna mother duality. And it's like, if you're having sex with everybody, you're horrible for one reason, and if you're not having sex, It all depends on who you're having sex with. It's also subjective because then like that person likes you, but the person that you don't have sex with hates you.
Yeah, exactly.
So it develops, and then then guys will even judge you for having sex with them. Like I've kind of had this, like those kind of one night situations, and then you're like, oh, this girl's fine.
Exactly, but if we viewed the women like getting worshipped by a guy every time that they have sex, and you're like, oh, well, this girl's been worshipped by all these guys, you'd be like, oh, well, they must be really good if all these guys worship them. But you don't think it that way. You think, oh, these guys had sex with her and used her up and then they were done.
Fucked her.
That's what guys think.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think having sex is like negative to them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a whole industry revolved around virginity and
so they must not be that confident in their abilities to like make women like sex. If it's like all these negative views of like, oh, if something was taken from her, well, obviously you aren't giving to that many women in your life, or you wouldn't have that opinion. Or the guys are all horrible at sex or something.
It's true. Eventually you're just over it.
If you thought guys were just like amazing in bed and like were giving women orgasms all over the place, you wouldn't think like a woman was stupid for having sex with guys.
I've always had a theory about this, that I found that the women who you would say were the most promiscuous got the most out of sex. That they were, had an easier ability to orgasm, even with a different partner on like a sudden thing, more prone to penetration orgasm, that
or they
like,
just know what they like.
or they just know how to move, so they just ride it up, So, and they just were people that were better at achieving orgasm, and they were more sexually active for that. And it totally
did you
makes
judge
sense.
them maybe a little bit less because you were like, oh, well, they're just like a sexual person.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a whole different thing. To me, it's weird, but there's always been something like a difference between that, like somebody who had sex with 30, 40 people and had that kind of vibe and were just fucked. And then the people who had maybe even half the sex, but if it was like, oh, this guy was pretending to like me, and
exactly,
like they just,
they're all heartbreaks.
Yeah, they're all heartbreaks, and like it's just gross and like desperate. So
you're just like, oh, these guys like fucked her up.
Yeah, and like that's how she feels. So
exactly.
She feels like she's damaged. So it's like a very, very different thing. I think confidence is really important in that way.
But I think that's almost like changing where guys are like running away from virgins because they're like, I don't want that responsibility, because they're taking it like as serious as they should. Like a person's first sexual encounter should be serious. So if you're just trying to fuck around, like maybe that's not the person you should go for.
For sure. And like there's something about just like not having sex and like hurting somebody and just kind of not playing that game or being dishonest. I always thought that it was a little bit dishonest, even if you pretend you're like in love with somebody who's just gorgeous. Like there's like a love, but she's an idiot.
But if you feel it, then maybe it's okay.
That's true. That is definitely a young mind. Like if that part of you loves them, your entire being.